The wind moaned softly across the open plains, brushing against the small wooden house that stood alone among the golden grasses. Inside, the fire burned low, its warmth barely reaching the man sitting in the rocking chair by the window. His eyes were red and hollow from sleepless nights. Thomas Hale, once the proudest rancher in Willow Creek, now sat with his newborn son cradled in his arms, a child far too small to understand the ache that filled the room. His wife, Clara, had passed 3 days after giving birth, her smile the last light before the world dimmed. The baby whimpered weakly, pressing his lips against the blanket, searching for what he could no longer find. "I'm sorry, little one," Thomas whispered, voice cracking. "I'm tryin'. I really am." He had tried the old cow's milk, watered down, and even mashed bread, but nothing worked. The boy needed what only a mother could give. Every time the baby's thin cries filled the cabin, guilt tore deeper into Thomas's heart. The ranch was silent now. The horses still ate, the wind still moved, but everything else felt frozen, like the world held its breath, mourning with him. Outside, dusk began to fall. Thomas laid the baby in the wooden cradle he'd carved months ago, before the tragedy. He ran a rough hand over the wood and then over his tired face. He hadn't eaten since morning. He hadn't slept since. He couldn't remember. Then came a sound. Knock. Knock. At first, Thomas thought it was the wind rattling the shutters. But it came again, firmer this time. He hesitated, hand hovering over the rifle leaning by the door. "Who's there?" he called, voice low. A pause. Then a soft female voice answered, "It's Mary. Mary Collins from the north pasture." Thomas frowned, opening the door a crack. The cold breeze swept in, carrying with it the faint scent of milk and hay. There she stood, Mary Collins, a widow herself, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. In her arms was a bundle of cloth, and her eyes, gentle, understanding, met his with quiet sympathy. "I heard about Clara," she said softly. "I'm so sorry, Thomas." He swallowed hard. "Thank you, Mary. It's been a hard few days." Her gaze shifted past him into the cabin. "The baby. He's inside." Mary nodded, stepping closer. "I just had my own not long ago. She passed 2 weeks back." Her voice trembled, but she steadied herself. "But my milk hasn't dried up yet. I thought maybe, if you'd allow, I could help feed your boy." Thomas blinked, stunned silent. For a moment, he could only stare at her, unsure whether to accept or protest. Pride and grief wrestled within him, but the weak cry from the cradle behind him decided it. He stepped aside. "Please." Mary entered, setting her bundle down. The firelight touched her face, revealing a gentleness that made Thomas's chest tighten. She knelt beside the cradle, lifting the baby with tender care. "Hey there, little fella," she whispered, smiling faintly. "You're hungry, aren't you?" The baby fussed and whimpered, tiny fists waving. Without hesitation, Mary settled into the rocking chair and brought the child close. The baby latched almost immediately, his cries melting into soft, contented sounds. Thomas turned away, overwhelmed. For the first time in days, the cabin filled with peace, a fragile, living sound. He rubbed his eyes with a trembling hand. Mary looked up at him, tears glimmering in her lashes. "He's strong. He just needed warmth." Thomas nodded, voice thick. "You don't know what this means, Mary." "I think I do," she said softly. "I know what it's like to lose someone and still have to keep going." He looked at her then, not as a neighbor, but as someone who understood the same dark, hollow ache he carried. As the baby fed, the silence between them grew gentle, almost healing. The crackle of the fire, the rhythmic creak of the rocker, the soft suckling sounds, it all became a lullaby. After a while, the child fell asleep in Mary's arms. She smiled down at him and laid him back in the cradle, tucking the blanket around his tiny body. Thomas whispered, You can't know how thankful I am. I thought I'd lose him too." Mary reached out, touching his arm. "You won't. He's got your strength." He looked at her hand, then at her face, finding kindness where he'd forgotten to look for it. She gathered her shawl but hesitated. "If you'd like, I can come by in the mornings and evenings, until he's a bit older." Thomas wanted to refuse, to stand proud like he always had, but when he looked at his sleeping son, all pride fell away. "I'd appreciate that," he said quietly. Mary smiled, faint but warm. Then it settled. Outside, night had fallen completely. She glanced toward the dark horizon. "You should rest, Thomas. He'll need you strong." He walked her to the door. "You've given me something I didn't think I'd find again." "What's that?" she asked, pausing. "Hope." Her eyes softened. "Then hold on to it, rancher. It's the only thing that keeps us alive out here." She turned to leave, her figure fading into the moonlit field. Thomas stood there long after she was gone, the cold air filling his lungs. When he turned back to the cradle, his son slept soundly, his little chest rising and falling, a tiny miracle of life. Thomas sat beside him, leaning back, and for the first time since Clara's passing, he let himself breathe deeply. The wind outside no longer sounded mournful, it sounded alive. Every evening after that, Mary came. She brought milk and warmth, sometimes bread or soup, sometimes just her quiet company. And slowly, the emptiness in that lonely house began to fade. Thomas learned to smile again. His baby grew stronger, eyes bright like his mother's, but laughter new and unbroken. Months passed, and when spring finally came to Willow Creek, the fields around the ranch bloomed green again. One morning, Thomas looked out the window and saw Mary walking up the path, sunlight on her hair, a basket in her hand. The baby reached for her as soon as she entered, cooing happily. Thomas chuckled. He knows his angel when he sees her. Mary blushed, shaking her head. "I'm no angel, Thomas." "Then what are you?" She smiled gently. "Just someone who couldn't turn away from a cry." He stepped closer, taking her hand, rough against smooth. "Then stay a while longer." Her eyes met his, warm as sunrise. "I was hoping you'd ask." And in that small cabin, once filled with loss, now filled with the soft sounds of life, Thomas realized something Clara had always said was true. Love doesn't die when a heart breaks. Sometimes, it's just waiting for another to hear the knock.